Hello and welcome back to another session. In today's session, we'll learn about another AWS compute service, AWS Elastic Beanstalk. This is again a developer's favorite and comes with some interesting features. So let's get started. This session will include four key topics. First, we'll see the fundamentals about Elastic Beanstalk, followed by some of the key features of it. Then we'll take a look at some of the major configurations of Elastic Beanstalk. And finally, we'll end the session with some pricing details. With Elastic Beanstalk, you can simply upload your code and it automatically handles the deployment, including provisioning, load balancing, auto scaling, and application health monitoring. However, you still retain full control over the AWS resources powering your application and can access the underlying resources at any time. It is a regional service, meaning all the resources that AWS provisions on your behalf for your application will lie in a single region where you choose to deploy the application and your code runs only in that region. Before going any further, we need to know the three main concepts in Elastic Beanstalk, that is application, environment, and platform. Application is a collection of Elastic Beanstalk components like environments, environment versions, and its configurations. An environment is a collection of AWS resources running a specific application version, and each environment can run only one app version at a time. So typically you would create one environment for testing and another for production. And finally, platform is a combination of operating system, programming language, web server, application server, and Elastic Beanstalk components. An Elastic Beanstalk provides a variety of platforms on which you can build your applications. So all three components are linked to each other and form the basis of Elastic Beanstalk. For troubleshooting your applications running in Elastic Beanstalk, you can use the events, which shows the list of recorded events for your environment, which include things like environment health, configuration updates, and basically every event that happens in your environment. And also you can have access to the infrastructure where you can directly pull the logs from each EC2 instance or direct those logs to Amazon CloudWatch logs, which can be used to monitor all your EC2 instance logs at one place. Elastic Beanstalk comes with auto-scaling group. However, you have to configure the group with a range of instances you want up and running at a time. And once that configuration is set, then the auto-scaling group takes care of adding or removing instances based on the load. So these are the fundamentals of Elastic Beanstalk. Next, let's see some of the key features of Elastic Beanstalk. Even though the infrastructure provisioning and deployment processes are automated, you have full control over the infrastructure. You have the freedom to select the AWS resources that suits your application. It supports various application platforms like Java, .NET, Node.js, PHP, Ruby, Python, Go, and Docker, which gives you the freedom to choose from one of them for your application. You can deploy your code through AWS Management Console or CLI, or even through Visual Studio or Eclipse. You also get to choose from different deployment policies like all at once, rolling, or immutable, and many more. Management and updates to your environment happen automatically, and if you select immutable deployment, then it ensures to minimize end-user impacts during the updates. It follows the list of compliance criteria mentioned here like ISO, PCI, SOC, and HIPAA, which enables you to run applications which process financial and protected health data without any additional work from your side. So those were some of the key features of Elastic Beanstalk. Next, we are going to take a look at the configuration options for the applications and environments in Elastic Beanstalk. The first thing you will have to select while creating any application is the platform. You have 10 options to choose from at the moment. They are listed here. And then you will have to upload your code as a source bundle, which will be stored in S3, or you can specify a S3 URL where you have already uploaded your files. Once you have done these two steps, AWS will configure the default settings based on the above. However, you can modify these default settings. Even in the default option, you have four configs to choose from. Single instance using spot instance, high availability using spot instance and on-demand instance. Even though these come with presets, you can modify them at any point. If you don't find any of these match your requirements, then you can opt for custom configurations where you can specify your own configuration from scratch. So next, let's see the specific config options available. There are 12 main categories of configurations, and under each category you have a set of options to choose from. The first category is software, under which you can select the proxy server for client connections, which can be either Apache or Nginx. This is a platform-specific configuration. Then you can either enable or disable AWS X-Ray for debugging. It's disabled by default, and when enabled comes with additional costs. You can choose to upload your instance logs to S3. Again, it comes with additional storage costs and it's disabled by default. You can even stream logs to CloudWatch, and it comes with additional costs and disabled by default. Finally, you can set environment properties which are specific to environment, like your DB connection details or Java home path, which varies for each environment. The next category is instances. You can select the root volume type, which can be either general purpose SSD or provisioned IOPS, magnetic or container default. Then you can enable or disable instance metadata service, which when enabled allows your application code to access the instance metadata of the instances. You can add your instance to security groups, which decides the traffic that can enter or leave your instances. The next category is capacity, under which you can specify the autoscaling group options, which includes the instance types, AMI, availability zone options, and the minimum and maximum number of instances. And also you can select the scaling triggers, that is the metric that determines when to scale out or scale in. The next category is load balancer, which applies only for high availability and not for single instance. So you can modify all the default settings for a load balancer right from its type, that is classic or application or network load balancer, to enabling or disabling the access log files for load balancers. The next category is deployments. You can select the deployment policy to be all at once, rolling, or immutable, and with each policy you can select different preference settings and config update options. Security involves how your EC2 instances access other AWS services, which is controlled by IAM role and instance profiles. You can specify them in this section. And also how you access the EC2 instance, which is by EC2 key pair that you specify here. Monitoring, if enabled, comes with additional price, and you can enable CloudWatch metrics and logs for monitoring the activities in your environment. You get a section to choose the maintenance window during which the platform updates are automatically applied to your environment, and if there are no updates, then if instance replacement is enabled, then your instances are replaced during this window. The next section in the list is notifications. When you provide an email address here, then you will receive a notification whenever there is an important event happening in your environment. Elastic Beanstalk achieved this by setting up an SNS topic automatically. Under Network, you can select a VPC if you don't want to use the default VPC, and also the subnets in which you want to place your instances and load balancers. Under Databases, you can specify the RDS database settings if your application requires one. Note that this will be destroyed automatically when you terminate your environment. However, you can retain the data by taking a snapshot. Finally, the last section is a simple one. You can add tags to your environment for tracking. So those are the 12 categories of configuration that Elastic Beanstalk allows us to edit and make the environment suitable for our application needs. Next, let's see what's the pricing model followed by Elastic Beanstalk. There is no additional charge for AWS Elastic Beanstalk. You pay only for the AWS resources, that is EC2 instances or S3 buckets that you create to store and run your application. You only pay for what you use, and there are no minimum fees and no upfront commitments. These are the underlying services which you may end up using as part of Elastic Beanstalk, and the pricing depends on the service. Okay, so we are at the end of the session. Let's have a quick look at the major highlights of Elastic Beanstalk. Elastic Beanstalk lets you upload your code and automatically handles deployment while you still retain the full control over the underlying AWS resources. You get a variety of options of platforms and deployment options to choose from, which gets updated more often by AWS to include new features. It has a rich set of configuration options, which lets you configure almost all of the environment. There is no additional charge for using Elastic Beanstalk. You pay only for the underlying AWS resources. That's it for today, guys. Hope you found it useful. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. We'll see you in another session soon. Thank you.